I despised the get-togethers at the county club that happened every few weeks. It felt like they came up with a million reasons to throw some fancy party where a bunch of wealthy folks could show off and boost their egos. However, my wife Sandra enjoyed attending and always seemed to eagerly anticipate them. Unfortunately, over the past year or so, Sandra began drinking excessively and occasionally ended up embarrassing herself, and by extension, me. Sandra and I had been married for 24 years, and we had 3 college-age children. I met my wife while pursuing my MBA, and we seemed to hit it off right away. About 10 years ago, things between us started to cool down, and I assumed it was just a natural progression. I wished for more affection and intimacy, but I hesitated to bring it up, fearing it might strain our relationship further. I came to accept that the rest of my life might not be as romantic as I had hoped. Despite this, I had a stable job that paid well, supporting our family financially, especially with the expenses of putting 3 kids through college. Sandra didn't work and wasn't interested in it, preferring to engage in community work and social activities. My income was crucial for maintaining her lifestyle. Despite her age, Sandra still looked good, likely due to her frequent visits to the spa and salon. On the other hand, I considered myself average, with a bit of a belly and some gray hair. My job required me to dress well, a habit encouraged by my wife's love for shopping. While I was proficient at my job, I wasn't truly satisfied. I longed for a change, something that would bring me joy without having to worry about the paycheck. Additionally, I yearned to relocate to a different place. The house was too big for just the 2 of us, and I disliked the expenses and effort needed to maintain it. However, my wife refused to even discuss the idea of downsizing. She was set on having her large house, country club membership, and wealthy social circle. At a recent gathering, I mingled around, engaging in trivial conversations here and there. As the night wore on, I nursed my final drink for quite some time, while Sandra continued to drink heavily. It seemed she had been indulging more than usual, and it was beginning to show. Over in one corner, a group of local ladies were engaged in a conversation about closeness, prompting me to quickly steer clear. Just as I was about to leave the room, I overheard Sandra speaking loudly. She mentioned someone named Todd Mitchell, attributing him to some of her most enjoyable experiences in bed. The room fell silent as some of the ladies noticed my presence nearby. Sandra, realizing I was there, tried to downplay her comment with drunken giggles, but it was clear her judgment was impaired. The other women seemed unsure how to react, with a few quietly leaving and the rest sitting in awkward silence. Sandra had a mischievous grin on her face as she looked at me. Setting my glass down on a nearby table, I quietly exited the room and left the club. Instead of going home, I headed to the airport and caught a commuter flight to Reno within 30 minutes. I always preferred Reno over Las Vegas. Being in Reno helped me see things more clearly in my relationship with Sandra. I spent the weekend in Reno to sort out some thoughts. Turning off my cell phone, I easily got a room at one of the casinos and quickly set up an account with $20,000 in the comp room. One interesting thing about casino accounts is that they aren't subject to federal regulations like banks, so there's no need for government reports. While big wins must be reported, deposits into the account are untraceable. I wasn't much of a gambler, but I appreciated their banking system. When I woke up Saturday noon, I pondered my situation over a burger and fries. Reno suited me well. The climate was pleasant due to the high altitude, and there were plenty of other amenities nearby because of the gaming industry. I decided to take a stroll down by the river to reflect on marriages that didn't work out. While I wasn't planning on getting a divorce in Reno, I thought about tossing my ring into the river later. On my way back to the hotel and casino, I noticed a real estate office with condos in the display window. Suddenly, buying a condo in Reno seemed like a good idea. After spending an hour in the office and 2 hours driving around, I found a small furnished unit that I really liked. The only issue was that I couldn't purchase it while still married. Fortunately, I managed to arrange a discreet lease-to-buy agreement with a substantial deposit. Offering a large deposit was my idea, and the seller was thrilled about it. One of the smartest decisions I made early in my marriage was taking charge of our finances. Sandra wasn't good with numbers or banking, so she was fine with me handling the bills as long as she could spend the money. That evening, I treated myself to a delicious sushi dinner. Before calling it a night, I deposited an additional $10,000 onto my Visa card at the casino's front desk. Despite the cash advance fee, I felt it was a worthwhile investment. The next morning, I woke up early and enjoyed breakfast at the casino restaurant. I ordered eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast, just the way I like it. While sipping my second cup of coffee, I noticed that my waitress had a noticeable bruise on her eye. She attempted to conceal it by brushing her hair forward, but it was still visible. Despite the bruise, she appeared friendly and professional, making sure all the customers were satisfied. However, it seemed like she was new to the job, as she seemed a bit too eager to please. A more experienced waitress would have been smoother and more confident in her approach. Nevertheless, I admired her determination to do well. I asked her about her name tag, which read Donna, and she explained that her real name was Dora, but Donna was the closest option available. After some banter, I offered to leave a generous tip if she shared the story behind her black eye. However, she politely declined, suggesting I leave a smaller tip instead. I agreed, realizing it was impolite of me to pry. Since I already had the condo key, I decided to pick up some essentials to furnish it. My first stop was the Silver Spur used car lot down the street, where I bought a Ford Focus sedan with high mileage. It wasn't ideal for long trips, but it would suffice for getting around town. I considered renting a car, but since I planned to return regularly, buying seemed like the better option for me. I managed to gather all the essentials I needed for a comfortable living with just a couple of $100, including a few outfits. The rest of the day was spent setting up accounts at various casinos. I wrote checks to each establishment, and the funds were deposited into my account without leaving any trace. By the day's end, I had deposited $60,000 across 4 different casinos. I also acquired a small spiral notebook to keep track of my gambling activities, jotting down amounts, dates, and casino names for a chronological record of my losses over the weekend. Although I hadn't actually lost any money, no one would question my entries, considering my reputation as a poor poker player. I had 6 months to come up with the down payment for the condo, which I deemed manageable. With lunch forgotten, I found myself famished by supper time. Returning to the breakfast spot, I was served by Dora, who was working double shifts to make ends meet due to the high rent in the area. I refrained from prying and simply ordered my meal, trying to be polite. As I finished, Dora apologized for her earlier brusqueness, and I accepted her apology graciously. Adjusting to being here has been tough, especially with this eye situation. It's a parting gift from my husband when I told him about my plans for divorce. Hopefully, this will be the final one. By the way, thanks for the generous tip at breakfast. It really helps. Although she smiled as she walked away, it seemed tinged with sadness. She lingered on my mind for the rest of the night. I realized there wasn't much I could do immediately, so I needed to head home to attend to some matters before I could make further arrangements here. Securing a flight back wasn't difficult, but I wasn't sure about my plans upon arrival. The next morning, I found Dora working and managed to catch her at one of her tables. After the meal, I approached her with a request. I have a small problem and was wondering if you could help me out. I need someone to house sit for me as I have to leave today and won't return for a week or so. It's a 2-bedroom condo, so there shouldn't be any living conflicts. Could you possibly assist me? It will be for at least a couple of months. Are you serious? No strings attached? She questioned. I hate to leave the place unattended, I assured her. 90% of the time it will be just you, and when I am here, I'll stay out of your way. I promise. Despite not caring much if anything happened to the place, I couldn't let Dora know that. Okay, is it within walking distance of the diner? She asked. It's pretty close, but I'm leaving you my car as well. Just make sure it always has gas for when I come back. I'll call you ahead of time. There's a voicemail on the phone. Dora stood there, seemingly hesitant, perhaps thinking it was a setup, but I didn't have time to persuade her otherwise. Here's the condo key and the car key. The car's parked at the condo. It's a dark blue Ford Focus. Here's the condo address. If you're not comfortable, it's okay, don't go. I'll pick up the keys next Friday when I return, I explained, jotting down the address on a napkin and handing it to her. She accepted the napkin and keys, still unsure. Dora, don't worry about it. If you decide to go, great. If not, that's fine too. An hour later, I was on my flight back home, though I would have preferred staying in Reno. After retrieving my car from the long-term parking, I swung by the house. Seeing Sandra's car gone, I grabbed some essentials for the week: clothes, shoes, my laptop, passport, and birth certificate. Luckily, the company had some kitchenette units available, so I reserved one for the next 2 weeks. I put my laptop on charge and then called my eldest son, Jason. I explained that his mother and I were facing some issues, and I'd be busy for a while. I asked him to reassure his sisters, who were all studying at Auburn, not to worry. Despite the out-of-state tuition, I was grateful we could afford their education. After ending the call, I plugged my cell phone into the charger and headed for a shower. The only food I managed to grab on the plane was a bag of peanuts, so I was eagerly anticipating a proper meal. Monday turned out to be quite busy. Before anything else, I made a trip to the bank and arranged for a substantial second mortgage on the house, exceeding its current value. But I knew that would change by the end of the month. I also sorted out the tuition for my kids directly with Auburn University through the bank, sending $240,000 to cover their prepaid fees. With a cashier's check of just over $200,000 in hand, I took care of some financial matters, including cashing in a couple of CDs and closing a money market account. I decided to hold off on dealing with the credit cards until later in the month. Running behind schedule for work, I found my secretary, Emily, waiting with a cup of black coffee and a grin. "Good morning, Mr. Terrell," she greeted me. "Heard about the county club incident on Friday. What's the plan?" "Yes, it's all true," I admitted. "I need you to gather all the information you can on Todd Mitchell, and please discreetly reschedule my appointments." Emily nodded in understanding, giving me a thumbs up as she left the office. I had initially thought it would take several weeks to sort everything out, but now it seemed achievable within a week. I promptly called my lawyer to schedule an immediate appointment. As I left, I made it clear to Emily that I wouldn't be taking any calls from my wife, and she wasn't to be allowed into the building by security. Jerry Proctor, a friend from college, was never fond of Sandra, so I thought he'd be the right choice to handle my divorce. "I was at the country club on Friday, Robert, so I have an idea why you were there." "You were spot on. I'm not trying to be smart, Bob, but it's about time. You were right again. I figured I could endure things as long as I wasn't publicly embarrassed, but that changed on Friday. I need access to all your accounts and a couple of powers of attorney. My assistant will prepare everything and give you a call. Is there anything specific I should know?" "Well, Jerry, I'm afraid the events of Friday triggered something in me. I've developed a gambling addiction. I spent the weekend in Reno and lost a significant amount of money. I'm going back next weekend and I fear it'll be worse." "That's terrible, buddy. Are you keeping records of your losses?" "I am, and I'll continue to do so. It might be wise for me to send you copies of everything." "Absolutely. Bob, I don't think we should discuss this further." "Agreed. Do you need anything else?" "I'm good, Bob. Handle your business and take care. Take this financial worksheet with you. Fill it out and bring it back tomorrow when you come in to sign those forms. I've got your back, buddy." I then realized I missed lunch. Emily had a helpful sheet ready for me with details about Todd Mitchell. She suggested I talk to Wilma Grimm in HR before anything else. Wilma was a longtime employee known for her efficiency. She always dressed professionally with her hair neatly in a bun, which could be intimidating. If Emily wanted me to meet her, it must be important. "Good afternoon, Mr. Terrell. Please have a seat," she said, trying to relax me, but I still felt uneasy. It felt like being in front of a stern teacher. Despite my position, I was in awe of her. She closed the office door, and Emily briefed me on the situation. "I don't engage in office gossip, but I deal in facts," Wilma stated firmly. "Todd Mitchell confided in me 3 years ago. I swore to keep it confidential, but it seems I can't anymore." She gave me a serious look. "If anything I say bothers you, feel free to leave, and our conversation will end. Don't direct your anger towards me. I'm just stating the truth. Do you understand, Mr. Terrell?" I nodded, assuring her I could handle whatever she had to say without overreacting. She frowned slightly at my attempt at humor. "About 3.5 years ago, your wife Sandra approached Todd Mitchell at a company event," she continued. "There was heavy drinking, and they ended up having closeness in one of the offices. Todd was about to get married, but Sandra threatened to expose their affair unless he continued seeing her. He hoped she'd stop after his wedding, but she didn't. She coerced him into having love with her for months, threatening to expose him if he refused. Desperate, he confided in me, sharing the whole story, which I couldn't ethically disclose to you or anyone else. The best solution was to transfer Todd to another office. Once he moved to Dallas, Sandra backed off. Todd never told his wife about the situation. Any questions? It seems Mr. Mitchell was just as much a victim in this mess as I was. I was considering retaliation, but that seems pointless now. Any advice, Miss Grimm? Now that you know, you have the upper hand. I suggest you let it go. Todd Mitchell is a valuable employee. Don't punish him for your wife's actions. Thanks for your time. I think you're right. Being coerced into intimacy with my wife is punishment enough. As we stood up, Wilma smiled. By the way, it's not Miss. I've been married for 32 years. It was hard to picture Wilma Grimm as a being, but perhaps when she lets her guard down, she transforms into a different persona. Suddenly, thoughts of a dominatrix came to mind, and I quickly changed the subject. I had more pressing matters than Wilma's personal life. Emily had rescheduled all my appointments, giving me a clean slate. Despite Emily's efforts to explain my absence, my wife called 3 times, refusing to believe I was in Baltimore. Emily arranged for me to meet with the company president the next day and with the legal department that afternoon. I invited Emily to have dinner with me. She chuckled and mentioned her husband wouldn't approve. She joked that I should consult Wilma instead. My time at the legal department ran longer than expected, resulting in me needing to compensate a few of the staff for overtime. I apologized, and fortunately, they were all understanding. The process turned out to be more complex than I had imagined. Getting a cash settlement from my retirement plan was challenging. Closing out the 401k and shared savings account went smoothly but took time. Cashing in my sick time, vacation time, and company insurance was comparatively easier. By then, it was clear that I was departing from the company. I hoped the news wouldn't reach my wife before I was ready. I ended up having dinner alone, oddly thinking about Dora during the meal. I pondered if she had moved into the condo and whether she was still working double shifts. Although I barely knew her, I felt a desire to return to Reno and see her. It felt somewhat immature, and I tried to dismiss the thought. It was foolish to dwell on fantasies that would never come true. The following morning, I cashed in 2 whole life insurance policies and canceled 2 term policies. I was surprised by how much cash value the whole life policies had accumulated. I could collect the checks the next morning. While my car was insured by the company, I canceled the insurance on Sandra's Lexus, which was leased under her name but insured under mine. Before heading to work, I stopped by Jerry's office, submitted the financial form, and signed numerous papers his secretary had prepared. When I returned to the office, Emily had coffee ready for me. Boss, I don't mean to add insult to injury, but you should speak with Calvin Bostic in settlements before meeting with Richard. Richard Ryder, the company president, probably already knows what I need to discuss with him. The settlements department was tucked away in the basement, devoid of sunlight like a dungeon. Calvin, Emily said you needed to talk to me. Calvin Bostic was a quiet, efficient guy who got his work done. He led me to a private corner and shared some concerning information. About 6 years ago, a guy named Raymond Upright worked here. He was married with kids, but got involved with your wife after an office party. She kept calling him at home and at work, refusing to let him end it. When he tried to break it off, she threatened to tell his wife. He called her bluff, but his wife found out and kicked him out, leading to his downfall. I don't know where he is now. Apparently your wife gave his wife $10,000 to keep quiet about the affair, though I can't confirm that part. Thanks, Cal. I wonder if anyone else has any good news for me. I didn't mean to upset you, Mr. Terrell, but Emily thought you should know. You did the right thing. I appreciate it. Afterward, I took the elevator straight up to the 9th floor. I arrived a little early for my meeting with Mr. Ryder, but he saw me right away. Our discussion was brief and to the point. The legal, personnel, and payroll departments would handle everything for me. Once everything settled, I was to call him personally from wherever I was. He handed me a card with his private cell number on the back. There were no promises, no regrets, and no nonsense. While things seemed resolved on one hand, they remained open-ended on the other. I simply nodded and left without saying a word. Emily greeted me with a smile upon my return to the office, handing me my usual cup of coffee. I returned the smile and said, "Book me a flight to Reno for Thursday morning with a 2-hour layover in Dallas." She gestured for me to look out the window. Sandra was in the parking lot arguing with a security guard. She's been there for over 20 minutes. They won't let her in, and she refuses to leave. What should we do, boss? It seems like the guards have the situation under control. My only concern now is finding someone to have dinner with. I don't like eating alone. I called Jerry to check on things. He said he couldn't do anything until I sorted out the financial mess. I needed to demonstrate that I had no money. Right now, I was financially well off. Between the checks I had, those that were on the way, and the cash in the bank, I was quite wealthy. I assured him I would head to Reno early and not return until I was completely broke. Sometimes one is a wealthy person. Occasionally, someone would poke their head in the door, telling me my wife was trying to reach me. She had all her friends calling their husbands at work to locate me. I stayed in the office a bit longer, tidying up to make things easier for my replacement. Sandra was perched on the hood of my car, waiting for me. Emily grinned and handed me the keys to her Honda Civic, suggesting it was a good excuse for her husband to pick her up and take her to dinner. "By the way, you're not planning anything reckless in Dallas, are you?" she asked. "No, just wrapping up some loose ends. No revenge, I promise," I replied. I grabbed dinner at the Outback in Allentown and was back in my apartment before midnight. The next morning flew by. I signed more paperwork for Jerry, closed all the bank accounts, and canceled the credit cards. I arranged to have the utilities turned off at the house the following week. I collected checks from the bank, insurance company, and work. I was surprised to find out I was worth so much. I got a new cell phone and canceled the one Sandra and I had. I sold my country club membership to an old friend for $23,000. My replacement was already settled in when I made my final stop at work. He seemed like a nice guy who came from Boston on 24 hours' notice. He saw it as a great opportunity. Since Emily knew more about running the office than I did, there was no need for me to train him. There were a few things left at the house I wished I had, but they weren't crucial enough for me to go back for. Emily insisted I keep her car, and her husband would pick it up at the airport. I had to grab a couple of cheap suitcases to pack my stuff from the apartment. Anything I forgot, I could buy in Reno. Suddenly, I realized I'd done everything I could. All my assets were now in cash. No stocks, no accounts, except the house, which I was giving to my wife. AirBlue was very flexible, offering available seats and moving up my flight. I called Jerry at home. "Hey, buddy, just wanted to let you know I'm leaving tonight. Hope you have everything you need." "I'm good, Bob. I can serve the papers tomorrow, but I still need that financial info soon." "You might as well give them to her. I'll send proof of financial irresponsibility ASAP. Be careful, Bob. I don't want either of us getting into trouble. Sandra will probably get a big-shot lawyer from Philly who might bail on her if things go south. It's up to you, Jerry. Just do your best for me, and don't overcharge. I'll be a poor man soon, don't forget that. Oh, and see if you can find a guy named Raymond Upright. There's a good chance he might need some help, and depending on the situation, I might be the one to provide it. Got it, Bobby. Have a safe flight and stay in touch." I called the condo and left a message on the machine saying I'd be arriving later that night. I didn't want her to be alarmed if she heard someone at the door, so I made sure to mention I'd call first. At this point, I didn't know if she'd be there or not. I could only hope. It was strange. I didn't even know this lady, yet I found myself hoping for some kind of relationship with her. Right now, just having her as a friend would be enough. Her situation made her vulnerable, and I didn't want to seem like I was taking advantage of that. I arrived in Dallas early enough to have a relaxed breakfast. I was waiting in Todd Mitchell's office when he arrived, and I could tell he wasn't pleased to see me. "Mr. Terrell, I'd like to say it's nice to see you, but that wouldn't be truthful," he said. "I think we both know that." "Relax, Todd. I hope you don't mind me being a little informal," I replied. "I'm not here to give you a hard time. I just wanted to let you know I understand the situation you were in a while back, and there are no hard feelings. You could have told me this over the phone," he pointed out. "I know, but I was passing through, and I thought it was worth my time to clear the air," I explained. "I don't get it. Why would you want to do this? I'm the one who messed up. I owe you an apology for what happened. You didn't do anything wrong. I was young and foolish, and I made a terrible mistake. Even now, I'm too ashamed to tell my wife about it. Todd, you were partly at fault for what happened, but I believe most of the problem was caused by my wife. Her actions created issues for you, and now for me. I'm not saying you were completely innocent, but it wasn't all your fault. I don't want you to carry any more guilt than necessary because of my wife's behavior. It's very generous of you to say that. I'm not sure what to say or how to repay you." I handed him one of Jerry's cards. "Give my lawyer a call later today. There's a chance he might ask for your help, very discreetly. He might say he doesn't need anything at this time. At most, he might ask for a notarized statement confirming the affair. I assure you, it won't get back to your wife." I stood up and we shook hands. It felt strange considering the circumstances, but I thought it was the right thing to do. Todd Mitchell was a decent man and didn't deserve to have his life disrupted because of one mistake, even if it had happened multiple times. An hour later, I boarded my flight back to Reno, pondering what went wrong. I put in hard work to provide for my wife and kids, ensuring they had everything they needed. But it seems in the process, I neglected my wife. When facing such issues, we often try to understand why they occurred. Usually I end up blaming myself somehow. I can accept that, but now I must confront Sandra's attempts to humiliate me. That's unacceptable. If she had been discreet, maybe I would have blamed myself forever. But she wasn't, so I won't. The evening ended well. When I arrived at Reno Tahoe International, Dora surprised me by waiting at baggage claim. She was dressed casually, not in her usual uniform. I didn't ask her to pick me up. I simply wanted her to know I was arriving. "Good evening, Dora. I wasn't expecting you." I figured since I had your car, it was the least I could do. "You're not working?" "No, I could cut back thanks to your offer." "I wasn't trying to be generous. I just wanted to find a way to be alone with you." "And what will you do when you have me alone?" "I haven't thought that far ahead. Any suggestions?" Seeing Dora blush, I realized it was time to stop before I frightened her away. I sensed she was teasing me a bit with her question, which felt like a good sign. 30 minutes later, we arrived back at her newly decorated apartment. It had subtle touches that didn't cost much, but made a big difference in the atmosphere. To show my appreciation for her efforts and for picking me up at the airport, I treated us to 2 prime rib dinners. It seemed like Dora enjoyed the wine more than the beef. "How's the divorce going?" I asked. "Terrible. I still have 3 weeks left before I can even apply," she replied. "You need 6 weeks to establish residency," I reminded her. "I thought this would be easier," she lamented. "Why didn't you do it from home?" I inquired. Dora paused, fidgeted with her food, then replied, "Getting away from Tony was more urgent than the divorce. It's just a piece of paper that won't stop him from hurting me. I guess I used the idea of divorce as an excuse to leave." Her words resonated with me. Initially, divorcing Sandra seemed important, but now I wasn't so sure. All I really wanted was to prevent her from benefiting from our marriage. And since I had no intention of remarrying, it didn't matter much. We spent the rest of the evening chatting about hobbies, movies, and books. I noticed Dora didn't have any children, but I didn't pry. That night, we slept in our own rooms. By the time I woke up, Dora had already left for work. I found fresh coffee waiting, which was all I needed. I was still stuffed from last night's dinner. After a quick shower, I got down to business. "Jerry, how's it going?" I asked when I called. He sighed heavily before replying, "Not good, Robert. I've got some bad news." "What happened? I've only been gone a day," I exclaimed. "Sandra stirred up trouble. She found out about the bank accounts and more," Jerry explained. "She got a restraining order against you for everything. All your accounts are frozen, even if they're empty. You can't go near her or the house. You can't take anything from the house, not even contact your adult children. It's a mess, and it'll take a lot of time and money to sort out." "Jerry, I don't want any part of this. I'm done," I confessed, feeling overwhelmed. "So, you won't be handling the divorce?" he clarified. "That's right, buddy," he confirmed. "And she hired a private detective to find you," he added. "I wonder how she'll pay for all this," I mused. "I don't know and I don't care. Just remember, if the cops or feds ask, I'll have to tell them where you are," Jerry warned. "I won't risk my career for you, even though we're friends." "Got it. Jerry, make sure you cover yourself. I'll handle things on my end. I'll lay low for a while and won't bother you. Thanks for being understanding, buddy. I was counting on you. Take care." Well, that threw a wrench into things. Even the best plans can fall apart suddenly. I had to come up with a plan B, but I didn't have one. My idea to pretend to lose all my money in the casinos was no longer an option. I decided not to involve anyone else. Thankfully, Dora left me her car, which was helpful. I didn't know how she got to work. I was left with a small bag filled with money and checks. I had to visit 6 different casinos to cash my checks and get chips or credit. I was worried about going to the banks in case there was a hold on anything. The casinos were cooperative and happy to assist me. By the end of the morning, I had deposited everything at several places and had a bag full of cash and chips. After a quick lunch, I started withdrawing the cash. Within 2 hours, I had converted all the chips to cash and emptied the casino accounts. Now I had a large bag of money and plenty of it. So far, there were no issues or suspicions. It took me less than an hour to drive to Carson City. I rented a large safety deposit box at a small bank and stored everything there, except $5,000, which I kept for spending money. I felt relieved knowing everything was secure. I was eager for another long dinner with Dora to celebrate. However, as soon as I entered the condo, I sensed something was off. Dora was doing her best to fix things that shouldn't have been messed up in the first place. When she looked at me, she immediately covered part of her face. "I'm sorry, Robert. It's my fault. I don't know how he found me, and didn't realize he was following me until I got into the apartment. I should have been more careful. I'm really sorry," she said apologetically. Slowly, I lowered her hand away from her face. Dora had a new bruise and a swollen lip. A large bluish bruise covered the right side of her face. "Was it Tony?" I asked. She nodded in agreement. "He had his 2 brothers with him. They're out looking for you now. Tony told me not to leave the condo." "Where are they searching?" "I gave them the names of 3 casinos. The idiots don't even know what you look like. I don't think they're thinking straight," she explained. It was clear what we had to do. We couldn't stay, and calling the cops wasn't an option. We left everything behind, drove west, and spent the night at a small motel in Grass Valley. There was only 1 bed, but I made sure to be a gentleman. I brought back some takeout and got some makeup for Dora. She tried her best to conceal the bruises, but it still looked bad. She kept apologizing to me all night. I was relieved when she finally fell asleep. The next day, we drove into Sacramento to get some clothes and personal items. I had booked the Grass Valley Motel for 2 more nights. Over the next few days, Dora and I spent time getting to know each other. There was no intimacy or suggestive comments between us. After just 3 days, I felt more at ease with Dora than I ever did with my wife of 24 years. When I wasn't chatting with Dora, I was consumed with worry about everything else going on. I hesitated to bring Dora back to the condo, fearing Tony might track her down. Similarly, I was reluctant to return myself, fearing someone might be looking for me, but I had carelessly left my laptop, passport, and other important documents there. I had a foolish notion that these items were crucial, which now seemed silly. Despite only knowing Dora for a few days, I felt compelled to trust her. We were both dealing with troublesome spouses. "Have you ever been to Mexico?" she asked. "No," I replied. "Are we going there?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Just in case things don't go well, there's something I want you to do for me. I don't want you getting into trouble, especially with Tony." "You don't owe me anything, Robert. You've already done more than enough," she assured. "Well, I'm unsure about what's ahead for me. I've stashed away a lot of money. It's not illegal, but I'm hiding it from my wife. If anything happens to me, you'll need to retrieve the cash for me." "Who's after you? You haven't mentioned that," she inquired. "Did you do something illegal?" "Several federal agencies are looking for me, along with a private detective. I'm sure the local police will be involved if necessary. All I'm trying to do is safeguard some money from my wife. What should I do with this money?" "I've been thinking about it. Head to Guadalajara and wait for me there. Use whatever money you need to get by until I arrive. How will you find me? Go to the La Libertad market for coffee every morning. I'll track you down. It's a big place, but I'll locate you. What should I do then? When you realize I'm in trouble? Why not do it now? Just be patient. I'll bring you along. I'd rather have you with me than go separately. I feel better when we're together. Can't we both leave now?" The conversation was getting repetitive, so I ignored her. I didn't mean to be rude, just eager to move forward. 2 hours later, we crossed the pass and reached Carson City. Dora's name was added to the access for the safety deposit box, and she got her own key. Back at the condo, I parked a bit away. The complex had a lower-level parking area beneath the units, open but covered. I asked Dora to wait in the car until I checked for any problems. What kind of problem? I wasn't sure. Given recent events, anything could happen, and it did. As I walked through the parking area, I noticed something odd. Then Robert Terrell turned around. He was a small, wiry man, looking rather strange in his long leather coat. It wasn't intimidating enough to match the large black tool he held in his hand. "Do I know you?" he asked, with a smile that seemed almost proud of his identity. "My name is Laszlo. Your wife sent me." "Okay. What can I do for you?" "I need your wedding ring and your wallet." "I understand the wedding ring, but why the wallet?" "I have to make this look like a robbery." "Make what look like a robbery?" "Your wife hired me to end you, Mr. Terrell. I hope she paid you up front because she doesn't have any money." "What do you mean?" That was the end of the conversation. 3 large Italians approached from across the parking area, looking menacing in their long leather coats. "Bobby Terrell, we want to talk to you," Tony shouted. Laszlo was caught off guard by the intrusion. As he turned to face them, one of them noticed the tool in his hand. All 3 reached into their coats as I dove across the concrete barrier toward the outside of the parking area. Laszlo lost interest in me momentarily. As I hurried along the side of the building toward the car, shots echoed off the garage walls. I glanced up to see Dora speeding down the street and 2 men in suits exiting a black SUV across the street. It was clear they were federal agents, likely waiting for me. The firefight distracted them enough for me to escape the area. Dora and the car were gone. There was no way I was returning to that condo. I didn't know who shot Laszlo in the parking garage, and I didn't want to know. What I did know was that 3 different groups were after me for various reasons simultaneously. I got the message. I had a few options. One was catching a bus to Carson City to retrieve my money, but I decided against it. I decided against going to Carson City because I was in too much trouble. Yeah, hot sums it up well. I was just trying to escape from my cheating wife. What the heck happened? Since I wanted to let things cool down with the money, I needed to find a place to hide out. I still had over $4,000 in my pocket, which would last me for a while. Why was my wife trying to have me ended? I guess she didn't realize there was no more insurance money. I thought she was smarter than that. I made a big mistake. I took a bus to San Francisco. $1,000 doesn't go far in the city by the bay. The first 1,000 got me a social security number and an ID, so at least I could get a job. I found a room with a shared bathroom and landed a job waiting tables in a low-key restaurant. After about a month, I was earning enough to support myself and becoming a pretty good waiter. Some customers even requested my tables. I hadn't been paying my cell phone bills, so the service got cut off. I hadn't used it since leaving Reno. It only cost me a few bucks to get a new prepaid service and about 50 minutes of airtime. I wanted to call Dora, but I had no idea where she was or how to reach her. So I decided to call Jerry. "Hey buddy, it's Robert. Just thought I'd get an update from you." Bobby, good to hear from you. Things are still messed up, but not as bad as you might think. Where the heck are you?" "None of your business where I am. Last time we spoke, I was dealing with a bunch of nasty people, all wanting something. Am I still a wanted man?" "Well, most of that mess cleared up, especially after Sandra was arrested. But it seems the IRS is still after some payment related to your 401k assets. Apart from that, most of it is fine." "What do you mean Sandra was arrested? I thought you would be the first to know about that. Ever heard of a guy named Lester Laszlo?" "Yeah, I met him briefly about 3 months ago. He tried to bump me off, but we got interrupted by some other guys who were after me. While they argued about who would get me, I slipped out the back door. How does he fit into this?" "Sandra hired Laszlo to end you. Laszlo got injured pretty bad in Reno and spilled everything to the police. He said Sandra was going to stiff him on a $10,000 contract, so he ratted her out. Surprisingly, the cops bought it and charged her. She can't make bail, so she's waiting for her trial in jail. Jerry, I'd love to help her out if she hadn't tried to have me ended. I think her parents should be able to bail her out, but I won't. Let me see what I can do, Bobby. Nobody seems to be that interested in you right now. Should I restart the divorce proceedings? We have pretty good grounds this time. Might as well. A divorce would be nice, but I don't really care anymore. I guess it would tidy things up. I kept all the other paperwork. I think I can still use most of it. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Your kids all came home when Sandra got in trouble. They were worried at first, but lost interest when the truth came out. They want you to call them and let them know you're okay. I'll get in touch with them as soon as I can. How did your money laundering scheme work out? Not worth a darn. I lost control and lost contact. I'll try to check on it next week. Jerry, sometimes even the best plans in the world just aren't good enough. Sure, I'll keep in touch, buddy. Oh, one more thing, Jerry. Did Sandra ever mention why she wanted me dead? Not that I know of. I figured it might have been for the insurance, but she didn't know you canceled it. I checked in with the kids and everything was fine. They felt relieved knowing the tuition had been prepaid. They asked about Sandra and me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. Some things would have to wait. I borrowed a car and drove up to Carson City. The safety deposit box was empty. She could have at least left a note. I couldn't complain, though, since I gave her the key and access. Did she go to Guadalajara or find a place where I couldn't find her? There was only one way to find out. There were several small travel agencies in my San Francisco neighborhood. Most of them offered group tours, which I didn't quite fit into. Finally found a tour to my favorite Mexican city with a last-minute cancellation that I could afford. It was the first time in my life I had to scrape together enough money for something. The trip wasn't that expensive. I just didn't have much money. I felt comfortable because some guys from work were on the trip. Most of them signed up for side trips, but I had other plans. The first 2 days were disappointing. The Libertad market was bigger than I imagined. It was a poor choice on my part. I wondered if Dora had taken my money and gone somewhere more exotic like Bangkok or Tahiti. There was enough money in that safety deposit box for her to live almost anywhere she wanted. I didn't know if I should wait for her to walk by or look for her. I ended up doing both. By the third day, I was getting bored. "It's about time, Robert. Where have you been?" I turned around and saw Doris standing with her hands on her hips. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat with a red band around it. "Say something, damn it. I've been going nuts here, not knowing if you were even alive or not." I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked over and kissed her for the first time. I don't know why I hadn't done it before, but I was glad I did it now. "That's a pretty pathetic explanation. Maybe you better try it again." The second kiss came with a big hug as I swung her around off the ground. "Dora, I missed you so bad. You still have to tell me where you were for the last month, but I can't wait till later. Let's go home and have some lunch." We walked through the market, hand in hand. I felt happy and content for the first time in a while. "Robert, don't get mad at me, but I spent some of your money. I put most of it in the bank, but I needed a place to live, so I bought us a house. I was hoping you wouldn't mind, because you had an awful lot of money in that bank." It was a beautiful hacienda in a beautiful city, and I was with a wonderful woman. I like it when a plan comes together. Sanders had an awful lot of money in that bank. It was a beautiful hacienda in a beautiful city, and that was with a wonderful woman. I like it when a plan comes together. Sanders' parents were able to raise her bail money and pay for her lawyers. Jerry had no trouble getting her signature on the divorce papers. She ended up getting 5 to 8 years for trying to have me ended. Never did find out why. Todd Mitchell gave Jerry a deposition, but Jerry never had to use it. Jerry was able to find Ray upright. He was sober, but not doing well. When Jerry asked him how he could assist, Ray expressed his desire for a hot dog pushcart. "I feel better after spending $2,400. I resolved my IRS issue for $4,000. The last I heard, Sandra and her brothers were still in jail in Nevada. We're unsure how long they'll be there. Now, I'm free to go back home. My old job, with a promotion, is waiting for me. The law isn't pursuing me anymore. Once Dora's Mexican divorce is final, we're planning to tie the knot. The kids will be down for the wedding during spring break. Although the house in Guadalajara is beautiful, we probably won't live there full time. Dora wants to keep it as a vacation home. Emily is eager for me to return to work, especially with the new position. It's a promotion for both of us. Dora is ready to go anywhere, as long as we're together. She wants me to introduce her to Sandra. That should be interesting. My plans didn't pan out as expected, but who am I to complain?